Hello, I'm Walt Bartman, and I'm the founder and director of the Yellow Barn Studio, Glen Echo. And tonight we're going to be interviewing one of our newest instructors, Nathaniel Williams. Each term we try to highlight instructors so that our students will get to know who they are. And after these interviews, hopefully you'll sign up and take his course. He is truly an outstanding, talented guy. I've met him, known him for about a year, and he impressed me so much that I invited him to teach at the Yellow Barn. So I think with that, I'm going to say hi, Nathaniel. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It's great to have you tonight. And what we're going to do is just I'm going to ask you a few questions, and this way everybody will get to know you and feel this is an important part now that we have Zoom and YouTube. We can really highlight our instructors. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, how did you get involved in the arts and painting?
Well, I think like a lot of artists, when I was a little kid, I was very drawn to any kind of drawing and painting. And then as I got older, that kind of naturally progressed into a more mature interest and hobby. And I got into oil painting, for example, when I was a teenager. Over time, I kept at it. My skill grew, my experience grew, and now I've been painting for about 15 years.
Yeah. So it's, like I said, when we first introduced you, you really impressed me with your work. And maybe what I can say is, maybe you can tell us a little bit about where you grew up and, some of the things that got you excited about this. Anything when you were younger?
Yeah, I grew up in Leesburg. I've always been into landscape painting pretty specifically. I've experimented with different things. I'll do still lifes every now and then, but it's really been my primary interest, both as an artist and as someone who looks at art. So definitely a lot of scenes of the local landscape, which is very beautiful in this area. Whenever we would travel, wherever that would be, I did a lot of beach paintings, for example. When I was younger, we'd go to the beach every year. So I would kind of respond to whatever was around me.
Yeah. So you're, people are going to get to see your work, and one of the reasons why I've hired you is you're one of the best realist painters that I know. Okay,
Thank you.
and I think is really, I've been impressed with your skill, and I think one of the things I might want to ask you is, did you have any influences as far as the art to go in that direction, or philosophically why you might have chosen to be a strong realist painter?
I think that there are a lot of reasons. I think that there are a lot of artists that I look at that inspire me. And I think that ultimately I want to, I know what kind of paintings I respond to, and I want to create, paintings that I personally respond to. And it's definitely in the realist tradition, representational painting, but specifically pretty realist depictions of what I see. I think for me, every painting, if you're painting representationally, there's a balance between the abstract content of the painting, which is the design of the painting, the arrangement of forms and colors, and then sort of the narrative content, which is maybe a little bit more emotional and it's more derived from what you're looking at, the way you would with a photograph or with what you're seeing in real life. And I think that for people who paint in a realist way, potentially the second has a stronger pull on them. Obviously, there's any good painting has to involve a pretty good sense of abstract design, but I think that for realist painting specifically, it's a pull of both of those.
Mhm. So I mean, one of the things that I've admired about your work is, your ability to paint the sense of place. And I think, you picked a number of these, we're going to see neighborhood scenes, which I think probably wouldn't be that interesting, but you really make them interesting. And truthfully, I'm impressed with your eyesight. I really think you have a pretty good way of really focusing in on things and seeing details and things like that other people might not see. So that has impressed me, and I think we're going to see that here in a few minutes. I think that what courses are you going to be teaching at the Yellow Barn?
So I am going to be teaching both spring and summer. I'm going to be teaching realist drawing and painting. And I think that I have a pretty good plan for how I'm going to teach that in the spring. And I think I'm going to stick with that or revise it based on how that goes. And specifically, if there are students that want to continue with me, I'll, plan a lot of new material that we can cover. So it's a little bit flexible.
So yeah, this is going to be, it's going to be interesting, because I think for people that are really interested in this style of painting, it's I think Nathaniel has a really good way of working, and he really understands how to make these images you're going to see in a way that are really impressive. Is there anything you can say to your students what you might expect from them?
Oh, I mean, first of all, I want to say that this is open to all skill levels. I think anyone who wants to paint in a more realist way, whatever that means to them, I think I've got something to offer. I want to be very inclusive of different styles. I think one of the big themes that I want to touch on in the class is the fact that if you build your painting practice with these skills, you can take them to all kinds of expressive purposes. You don't need to paint like a realist or a photorealist, but having that skill may allow you to be a more effective abstract painter, for example. So that's one thing I want to point out. All students are welcome. All mediums. We will be talking a little bit more about oil, most likely, but if a lot of students are working in another medium, we can obviously adapt. And I'm going to be talking a lot about the landscape. I'm going to be talking a lot about how light pervades a scene. And I think that that's best understood in the context of the landscape, but also interior scenes, still lifes, figurative works, which go beyond just a portrait. I think all of those people working in any of those kinds of subject matter will get something out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think people are going to, really find that your work's impressive. So now I want to kind of share the screen and let people see exactly who you are. All right. And I think we're seeing the PowerPoint now, aren't we not? That's up for us. So we're going to play from the current slide. This is one of your pieces here. And I think, for me, this was one of the pieces that really impressed me. I'm going to go to the next one here so that we can see it more clearly. But the, here, I'm very familiar with the subject, first of all. And it's a typical kind of, I would say urban, suburban kind of, subject. We see it in these small shopping centers. And I think, if anything, in our area, and you're in Brunswick right now, I think this is a typical scene that we drive by all the time. To see you be able to take it and make it interesting like you have is pretty impressive. But also, just even down to the cracks in the parking lot, this is pretty intense work. And I know you, and I don't know how long this particular piece took you, but it really surprises me how fast you can kind of finish a piece like this. So maybe you can talk about it. Tell us a little bit about how you started it, what you were thinking about, why you selected the subject, share with us.
Yes, so I have a lot to share about this painting specifically. So I have to say, this is my personal favorite painting that I've done for a lot of reasons. I think that this one, for context, took me a week or two. My process for different paintings, I adapted to the subject matter. I'll approach paintings in completely different ways based on what I feel like the subject matter needs. In this case, I did monochromatic underpainting using burnt umber and white, fairly thin paint. That's a very typical way for me to start a more complex scene like this. Like, there's a lot going on. This is 12 by 12 inches for context. So it requires a lot of control. And I do that underpainting process for several reasons. I established the value relations right off the bat, and I also established a drawing. So when you're working with one color, it's very easy to paint something in, wipe it out, paint it again, wipe it out. And I'll do that, and you don't really make a mess. And then once that dries and you can paint over it in color, obviously you can add all these details. In this case, I didn't do the sky in the underpainting. I knew I wanted to do that in a more kind of alla prima approach. So that was painted entirely in the final layer of the painting.
Mm-hmm. And is there anything you can share with us as to even why you picked this subject?
I really like this. It's in a town in our area. I happened to be walking by, and this scene really caught my eye. There was something that was both the wide open space really drew me to it. And that was one of the biggest challenges in painting this. I mean, it's a huge parking lot that you're looking across. It was nearly empty, and you're looking at this grocery store in the back, which is, I guess, fairly quiet. Something about that scene just sort of resonated with me, and especially the sky, the drama in the sky. I think in a lot of my paintings, I'm drawn to this juxtaposition of some beautiful sky or some sort of natural beauty in these very ordinary settings. And I think that just juxtaposition is something that a lot of people respond to, even if it's not entirely something they're aware of responding to.
Yeah, and what's important for everybody who's looking at this was painted from life, right?
No, it was not.
It was not. Okay.
Different
All right.
different paintings. Yeah, this one I did a sketch. I had some photos. I tried to work out the issues from that, but different paintings. I'll take different approaches.
Okay, so yeah, talk a little bit about this approach, because I think that one of the things is that it feels so natural. And I've seen you paint on location, so I know that this compares to what you do normally,
Yeah.
right? And there's no difference. There's no difference for me. That's why I asked you, because when I looked at the piece, I thought, well, it's possible that he painted from life here, and and it feels like that. So that's hard to do sometimes, especially if you're somewhat of a realist and you're working with the photos. Sometimes you can just copy the photo. So how true were you to the photo, do you think? And and what else can you tell us about that whole process?
Yeah, and the answer is not 100%. I think that people might look at my paintings and see a lot of detail. I changed things, and I remember the things that I changed. The perspective in the photo, I liked the way that the cars looked, and I liked the angle of the parking lot. But when I was standing here, the building was kind of tilted more at an angle, and I didn't like that. I wanted it to be back in space. So I had to do some preparatory drawing in advance to get the perspective right, to get it to sit back farther. And that was part of the challenge that I mentioned of creating this illusion of a big amount of space when the horizon line is, below the halfway mark in the painting. That's not much space to work with. So that was one of the things that I changed. I simplified the tree line quite a bit. There were trees on the left which were taller. That didn't really contribute to the design of the painting from my perspective. I wanted it to be fairly even and then slope up to the right over the top of the roof there. And then in terms of things like why I would choose to paint something indoors versus outdoors, I mean, it's pretty simple. You have a lot more control when you're working indoors, or when you bring a painting indoors rather than finishing it outside. For this painting, that's what I wanted to do. I felt like that's how I wanted to handle this scene, but other scenes I might feel differently about.
So if students were working with you and they were going to work from photos, which most likely they're going to in some
Yes.
respects, because you're going to be on Zoom. This is going to be an online course that you're teaching.
That's right.
How would you have them working with their photos?
So one of the biggest things that I'd like to touch on in my course is going to be value. And I think that obviously all artists understand that when you work with photos, there's a certain amount of distortion that goes on. And that happens both with value, color, and with perspective to some extent. And the only way to really address that is to get a lot of work done painting from life or outdoors, or at least a lot of observation done, so that when you look at photos, you understand what's missing or what's been changed. So your ability to see that and factor that in allows you to create paintings made from photos that look a lot more lifelike. So that's pretty important. For me, I think kind of everything comes back to value. So yes, there are distortions in both color and the perspective of things in photos, but I see the biggest distortion in values. And I think that addressing that as you're painting is the best way to create a lifelike painting.
Mm-hmm. And as far as palette is concerned, is there a certain set of colors that you work with?
Yeah, I work with a pretty limited palette. So my full palette would be titanium white, cadmium lemon, cadmium yellow, cadmium red, permanent alizarin crimson, burnt umber, ultramarine blue, cobalt blue, cerulean blue, and viridian. However, in every painting, I try and limit the number of colors that I'm using to the smallest number possible. In some paintings, it'll just be white and 4 colors, and I almost never use that full range. I often take out cadmium red. I'll take out at least one of the blues, sometimes viridian. It depends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. I love this painting, and what I love about it is the surface, the way you keep us on the picture plane, and really it's the parking lot that makes the whole painting. I mean, it really is interesting. There isn't a lot of line directing our eye, but you really get our eye to move through that and feel the distance, which I think is really, this is magical. It's a good piece. It's one of my favorites of yours too. All right, so we'll go on to the next one. This is, maybe you can talk a little bit about this one.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So this is a scene in Brunswick. So live in Brunswick now. I'm gonna relocate soon. However, a lot of my paintings deal with Brunswick scenes specifically. There are a lot of really interesting houses here. I could go into some of the architectural history in Brunswick because I find it fascinating. But basically, a lot of the houses are built on the same design because the city was built almost entirely over a period of 20 years between 1890 and 1910. And since then, each house has changed according to its individual owners. So they're completely different looking. But when you see that regularity, you notice these differences, they really stand out and take on this individual character. For me, houses in general are kind of stand-ins in paintings for the people that live there. And that's the power that they have. And it's in Brunswick, for me, it's even more powerful knowing that it's a reflection of the people who have lived there for 100 years, the different people that have lived there. So that's kind of some background in why I like painting these Brunswick houses so much. This painting specifically I had a lot of fun with. So this was an evening scene. This was shortly after sunset. So the yellow glow that you see in the windows is the reflection of the sunset to the west. And this is a challenging scene to paint, these low light scenes, because the value range becomes very compressed and you're dealing with less strong light sources that throw less strong shadows that model forms, for example. So this is, I think, some of the most evocative kind of scenes out there, but also the most challenging to paint. So that was a challenge I faced in this one. I had a lot of fun with it. That light off to the left, I think, adds so much to the painting, both design-wise and just in terms of the overall feel. And one more thing I'll say about it, I think that a lot of my paintings look at houses head on, and that's in some ways a simple design, but the challenge there is both making it interesting and making it convincing. And the way I deal with that is I think that you always need certain markers of depth in landscape painting to create a sense of space. So what I mean by that, for example, is the trees in the distance, and I think you might be able to get a sense from the truck that it's downhill. That gives you a sense of the scale and the distance and the whole landscape that this house is situated in, even though you're kind of focusing in on one thing. So when I select subject matter, that's something that I'm looking for.
Yeah, and like you said, you really do get that feeling from your work that these houses are about the people that live there. And it's not that you romanticize it. I mean, it really has a certain kind of a character that we all can feel. And that's why I feel when I look at your work, the whole nature of the realistic quality is not just in your precision of drawing and painting, but just the nature of the essence of the idea. You really capture that. You capture a real feeling, okay, that I think we all grew up with, perhaps, and in the neighborhoods that we lived in. So you did a wonderful job with this particular piece. And I think what I've always found fascinating is all the detail you're able to put into the piece, like the air conditioner that we find in the window. And talk about your brushes. Do you use small brushes? What size do you use?
So as a general rule, I heard this from some artists and I've stuck with it ever since then. In any given situation, you should always use the largest brush that you can. So I follow that pretty literally. So for a lot of my paintings, especially starting out, I'll be using fairly large brushes. Now these are small paintings, so large in relation to the paintings, like size 8 or 10. I use a lot of filberts, and I use those for broader flat areas of color, like the sky, pavements, and especially in foliage. For all other details, I use flats, and those will range from very tiny for when I really get into the details to fairly large.
So how do you make these overhead wires? That intrigues me, right?
Overhead wires are hard, and you have to, I think that everyone needs to have a practice that they're comfortable with. And the challenge with any kind of painting is just the material. I mean, you're manipulating this oily substance, or with watercolor, this goopy substance, and you have to understand like how it behaves. I learned that you have to paint these wires, or I have to paint these wires when the sky is still wet. Otherwise, it won't work, because that's
Mhm.
the only way that you can get these super fine lines and then adjust them. Because if the sky is dry or half dry, it turns into a mess. So I have to make sure that I have enough time to both paint the sky and paint the wires in the same day. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Yeah, that's a real interesting thing to learn. That's for sure. And then this particular piece.
Yeah, I wanted to share this one. I like this one a lot. This is one of my watercolors. I'm definitely more of an oil painter, but I do work in watercolor sometimes. I love it, but I find it frustrating. This particular scene is a farm near Burkittsville, and what I was drawn to, this was a thunderstorm, I think in late summer, and had the quality of those thunderstorms where the sky is very light, and it almost feels more threatening than those thunderstorms where the sky is very dark. So maybe it didn't come across in this photo all that well, but it has a real yellowish glow to it. And I think that I don't work with such strong yellows as often in my landscapes, especially, but this one definitely had a little bit of it, and I was pushing that. So I enjoyed working with that. And I tried to take advantage of what watercolor has to offer, which oil does not, which is working in very gestural ways to deal with different subject matter. Like if you look at the larger tree on the right, there are little suggestions of leaves blowing off of it. These lights, I painted them with Chinese white. I only use that for the details in watercolor, but I used first a mix of a really strong phthalo blue and white, and then over top of it white to give it that electric look. So little things like that. I would just really had fun working with watercolor as a medium in this one.
Yeah, this and you know the interesting thing again is just the nature of how closely we can look at your paintings. You know, I
Mhm.
think this is fascinating, and one of the things for everybody to know, and one of the reasons why I like it, Nathaniel's work, is because you can look up close at it, and you can stand back and look at it, and you don't lose anything when you stand back. It's fascinating, but there's a clarity to his work that I feel makes his work unique that way. And you know, I'm sure he's not doing anything special. He's just doing what he does. But that's one of the things. Do you stand back when you're painting? How
Oh
close
yeah.
do you get to it?
Oh yeah. I mean, I always do a little bit, and then I take a step way back. I have a small room here. It's like, not that wide, but I have to go all the way across the room to look at it. Then I'll get up way up close to the painting. And I'm really intrigued by surface quality as an aspect of any kind of painting. And that's something I really go for. So I want it to look good from any distance, like you're saying.
Mhm. Yeah, and your compositions are good. This is a really strong composition, and I think, you know, when we look at where you place things, you know, any tips to this particular one that you might share with us?
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things. I mean, I tend to put things towards the center of the painting, which you're not often supposed to do. I find it interesting, and there are a lot of great artists who do that. And I think that the way you can be successful about it is be really intentional about it. So, in a lot of my paintings, my oil paintings, that is, I'll draw a line down the middle of the panel before I even get started. So when I'm arranging everything, I have that as a reference point. So I know where things are. And if I want it to be in the middle, I'll do it on purpose. And if I don't, I won't do it. You can't really do that with watercolor, but the same thing applies here. This scene, I think what helps it so much is so much of it is so much of the interest is on the right side of the painting. So it's not symmetrical across competing points of interest.
Yeah, that's fascinating, but you take us from the right and move us to the left. So
Yeah.
it's you know, you really direct the eye well in this piece. All right, so then the next one, I like this one a lot. This might be the one over there that I'm going to tell you. I got a lot of favorites, but this is a
Okay.
one that I particularly like. What do you think about this one, and what would
Yeah.
you do?
So I just finished it. This is my most recent painting. I really like it. And I wanted to share this one for a lot of reasons. So first of all, I think that landscape painters in general understand the challenge of painting green. And we most often understand that in the context of painting like woods or painting whatever. But this is an almost entirely green painting because the house is green, except for parts of it that are white. And that was so interesting to me. And when I saw this, I saw it with that lit window in the right hand upper corner, which was what really sort of pulled me in emotionally. But it was a very fun challenge working on this one. And the way I dealt with that again, I was very focused on values. So I knew that the masses of foliage in the back had to be very dark, even the areas which were modeled with highlights, that had to sit back in the distance a little bit. And as with the bushes on the right side, compared to like the foreground, which had to be much lighter. And I had to focus on the areas of warmth where it occurred. So the building in the back, the taillights in the car, and the chimney. And one interesting thing that I want to share about this painting is that I changed more with this painting than I do with most. So this is another house in Brunswick, and I think that people in Brunswick would probably recognize it. But there was a lot of stuff going on in the foreground that I didn't think contributed to this as a painting, so I took it out. There was this chain link fence, there were other plants and things, and I wanted a sense of like this open space. You're looking up this small hill up to this house, and all that stuff kind of cluttered the painting. And the other thing that I changed was pretty dramatically the color and value of the house in the background. In real life, it's much cooler and darker, but just for the reason I was saying, having so many greens in the painting, it wasn't working. So I made it a little bit redder and a lot lighter in value, and that really balanced everything out for me.
Yeah. Do you find yourself being like Andrew Wyeth? Do you have any connection to him in any way? Do you study his work?
Yeah, I do like Andrew Wyeth, and I went up to Chad's Ford one time to see some of what he's painted, which I thought was super interesting. Anyone in the area who's interested in him should do that, because I think it's very instructive. I think that Andrew Wyeth and a lot of other American artists tapped into something that I really respond to. So I feel like the artists that I most admire come out of this tradition of American landscape painting, or like scene painting. Like Edward Hopper is a huge influence for me. And there's an emotional quality to their work that I think is distinctive among artists of different countries and different generations. And I do think there's a sort of a connection there in terms of what I'm looking at.
Yeah, there's no doubt we can feel the nostalgia in this piece, but again, we can feel the family that lives in this particular house. And the color combinations in this piece are really terrific. Your drawing is so good. How do you get to be so good at drawing? Is there anything you can share with the people who are listening?
It's not complicated, and this is one of the things that I want to talk about in the class. So first of all, this painting presents a lot of challenges of perspective, because you're looking at the house at an angle, which is already a challenge, and you're looking at it uphill. So there's a lot to look at. And the answer is I have a pencil here. I take a paintbrush and I stand at a distance and I hold it up and I just check it. And I do that whether I'm painting in life, where it works a little bit better. And from a photo, you have to stand back a little bit. And I use that to check myself. And I just pay attention, because so much of what I paint is architectural in nature. There are a lot of parallel lines in it anyway, in the horizontals, which will be affected by linear perspective. I make sure that I know where all the other parallel lines are, and they're pointed in a way that makes sense. And with painting in a realist way, I think one of the points that I want to make in this class is that you don't need as much detail as people may think you need. You suggest a lot just by getting value and perspective correct, and you really get to decide how much detail you want to include.
Yeah, I'm impressed. I really am. I'm impressed with your greens as well, the mixing of them and the warm and cool nature of them.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is great. And then this is another favorite of mine.
Yes, this is a good
The
one.
mystery is so amazing here.
Yeah, I do night scenes on occasion. This one I think turned out very well. I think that it's so dramatic, and what I liked about this scene, it simplified so much, because the whole bottom half of the painting is black, basically. There's nothing there. It's all in the top half of the painting, and that creates such a dramatic design and such a dramatic sense of place. It really, so that's what drew me to this particular scene. And then of course the lighted window. And I think that that really is the focal point of the painting, both in terms of, the design and also what people feel about it. They're probably drawn to that window. This one I painted very quickly, and I think that in general, I want to stay flexible when I'm painting. Like, I want to be able to say, like, I'm done with this now. I don't need to do anything more. And this was an example of that, keeping things relatively simple and liking it and just stopping.
And is this this is one of three that are at the Washington County Museum right now?
Yes, so I have 3 paintings right now at the annual Cumberland Valley Artists Exhibit, which is at the Washington County Museum in Hagerstown. I was really thrilled to be in the show, and this one was awarded an honorable mention, which was really exciting.
Yeah, it's really a powerful piece. And this again is Brunswick, Maryland. No one has painted Brunswick like you. I mean, I'm sure over the years there probably were some really good painters in the area, and they may have dealt with Brunswick as a theme. But I think you connect more with the people than anyone that I know who's painted, and that's because you're painting their houses. And I think that this is one of the things that's a key. So here's another one that I think is very fascinating. This is really late evening when the light is really almost gone. You want to share your idea here?
Yeah, this one was a challenge. This was another one I completed recently. I am really drawn to these very low light scenes, whether it's a nighttime scene or early dawn or late evening. And they're about the most challenging things to paint because there's so much going on. Your ability to see details is greatly reduced, and it becomes harder to tell like what information should be included and what not, compared to in daylight when there's such strong contrast that it sort of orders itself more clearly. And then just in terms of the challenge of painting a sky like this, you go from a gradation of this very vibrant, bright yellowish color, and then into these deep oranges and purples and greens, and it can be easy. I've done it, obviously. It can be turned into a bit of a mess. So you have to handle the paint in a way that allows you to create that sense of light.
Yeah.
So this was a challenge.
Yeah. And was this from a photo or is this from life?
So this is a Brunswick scene. It was from a photo, which I painted. And then I decided I wanted to try it again. So I was looking at both the photo and the painting. And one thing that I will say about the Brunswick scenes that I paint is I work from a photo, but I live in Brunswick. I go out and look at it as I'm working on the painting to check myself. And I found that as a very, very good way to balance what I'm doing when I'm working with photos.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, because a lot of artists are working in a studio, they're working from a variety of sources, and I think it's interesting to see, just exactly the kind of ideas that people are coming up with. Your compositions are really unique. I mean, this is a real strong radial composition for sure, but just that detail on the left, I keep moving back and it just stays the same, whether I'm up close or not. You can see it from a distance quite well. And it's fascinating, the kind of balance in the painting, because even though you put all the detail on the left side, the painting is balanced and it works. And I think it's probably perhaps the tree that's in the middle that does that. I have a feeling, because I think that contributes to making us kind of have a vignette. We're looking at the left side and then we're looking at the right side. So that is quite interesting. And then this is sort of the same. I know this view because this is right down around the bend from my house, actually. And it's a gorgeous view to paint. Anything about this one?
Yeah, so this is actually the same view that I painted in my watercolor. Obviously, very different time of year. I painted this on location, so this gives you an idea of what I can do on location. This one, it was a cold day, so I definitely did more work at home once I came back in. But I was interested in this light effect specifically because it was one of those days where the sun is kind of behind clouds, and it makes the snow a little bit darker, and it puts the whole ground plane in shadow while the sky is still fairly light, and that's a challenge. So that's what I was interested in here. And one thing that I'll say about this scene, and it's one of the reasons that I've returned to it again, I think that when you work in landscapes like this, where you're really dealing with kind of a traditional subject matter with a foreground, middle ground, background, and then a sky, using little things to mark distance adds so much to the painting, and that's something I really seek out. So in this one, for example, on the bottom left corner, there's a little twig and you can barely see it. I don't even remember if it was there in real life or if I just added it in, because I'll do that sometimes. That established how close you were at the very bottom of the painting as you progress, because then there are fence posts behind it, but those are already in the distance. So you don't know what that distance is, but you need to understand that for the painting to read. And these are super subtle things, but adding them, again, it makes the painting look like there's more detail than there is, because a viewer will look at it and they'll understand the space better than if those markers weren't there.
Mhm. Yeah, and when I look at your work, I mean, the fact that you're working from life here and the other ones are, some of the other ones are from photo, they're very much the same. I mean, you have this kind of ability to really paint detail. And for anybody who's really into that very descriptive approach to painting, Nathaniel's work, he'll work really closely with you, I'm sure, share a lot of his secrets that way. But like you said, people will have different styles. And honestly, there's a lot to learn from you other than just that precision. I think you're really, your ability to compose and things like that really speaks well. And this is a great example of that. Okay, so then the next one.
Yeah, this is another watercolor. I wanted to add it just to give everyone a sense of the range of what I work with. I kind of like this painting a lot, and it's an example of one where I really step back from the detail, and it's very painterly. I mean, I was thinking a lot about Winslow Homer watercolors when I was painting this, his scenes in the Adirondacks where he just uses 3 brushstrokes to suggest a tree. And it's a scene in Maine, and I was really struck by this tree that had fallen and had been there for probably a very long time, and it was such a vibrant white against everything else in the scene. It was something that I felt like I really wanted to paint. And I had a lot of fun exploring the different textures in this, and just using watercolor again in a way that takes advantage of what it offers as a medium to paint fairly quickly.
Yeah, I just always am amazed with the way you get us to see here, because it really is like the normal way that we would experience this. And I think you do a great job with that. You connect well with the scene that you're painting, as a viewer looking at your work. So yeah, that and if anything, I mean, you're going up to Vermont now, so you'll be up in that area again where you have all those pine trees to paint, right?
Yeah, I like pine trees.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. And then this beauty.
Okay, yes.
Yeah, you want to speak about this one?
I have a lot of, this is a very, this painting kind of means a lot to me now. I like it a lot. Very interesting. I did something a little bit different with this one. I went out, there was a town north of Frederick called Woodsboro. I had never been there before. I wanted to check it out. And I thought there's so much to paint here. So this is just the first thing I've done there. I set up, I started the painting, and I knew it was going to be a complicated one, but I wanted to get it started outdoors. I thought it'd be a fun challenge, and I'm working on bringing a lot more color and light into my painting. So starting it outdoors was beneficial for that. I came home that evening. I developed a sore throat, and then I had COVID, and I was so it was okay. I mean, I'd been vaccinated, of course. And I looked at this painting and I said, oh, this is terrible. I'm going to wipe this off. And, the panel, if I wipe it off now, I can reuse the panel and whatever. And my girlfriend said, no, don't do it. I kind of like it. But, I mean, if you have a fever or whatever, like you're thinking whatever. So I did keep it and I worked on it while I was sick, and it turned out really well. I think it's one of my favorites. So I'm definitely glad that I kept it.
Yeah. Again, that's one of those, I think your signature is a frontal view of buildings, which I think is really interesting. And, I'm looking at the pattern of the windows. I'm sure they probably were like that. You didn't leave any windows out or add any, did you?
No.
No.
I thought this was
Do you ever do that?
interesting.
Yeah. Do you
Yeah,
ever?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I like buildings that are a little bit weird, and this building is obviously very asymmetrical, and I painted it as I saw it, and I liked it for that reason.
Mhm.
So yes.
Yeah, and that you capture, I mean, what's funny is you can capture time well in your work. I mean, we can see the difference between the age of the garage and the age of the building. I mean, it's really interesting how you're able to do that. And I find that fascinating too. I love this one.
Yeah, this is another Brunswick scene. So this is another night scene that I've done. I'm so intrigued by painting the night because it's, half of our lives are spent at nighttime, and as landscape painters, at least I haven't devoted half of my attention to night and understanding the light effects that exist at night. So I've been trying to do a lot more of that lately, and I think that there's so much to see there. It changes the way you see everything. Things become simplified um, in some respects, but in other respects more complicated. So in this one, for example, there's obviously the full moon, but the main light source for what you're seeing is an artificial light that's back behind to where the right of where the viewer would be. Dealing with multiple light sources obviously gets really complicated. And I'm hoping that the cast shadow and the brightness on the leftmost corner of that building really draws the viewer in and shows them where that light source is coming from.
Mhm.
So
Well,
this one was just,
yeah, go
oh,
ahead.
go ahead.
I was going to say, I felt that. I felt that there was another light source because you can see the shadow of the building on the other building too, you know. So
Yes.
it's interesting that way. Your use of edges, where you really lose edges, I think are really also very interesting because you do that a lot, where you'll integrate the background into the form, like the house.
Mm,
And I think that area further down the street reads that way. So that's
yes.
fascinating. You know, I find a lot like this one is very easy to say, oh, I can feel Hopper in this one.
Mm.
All right. Edward Hopper, any influence on you?
Yeah, huge. I just read a biography about him. It was very interesting. His he was such an interesting painter. His ability to compose a scene is totally unique, and I think that that's why we return to his work so often. I mean, it's sometimes it's haunting, but it's very compelling. You're drawn in, and it's not like photographs, for example. He doesn't work like a photographer the way that some painters do, and that's what really interests me.
Mhm. Yeah. And do you ever get to know the people that live in these houses?
Um, Occasionally. I don't know who lives in these houses. I know someone who lives immediately next door to these people. This, incidentally, is the same hill that you're looking down as that second square painting that we were talking about.
Mhm.
The same hill that house is to the right. Um, but one time someone reached out to me. A lot of people in Brunswick have connected with my work, which has been really awesome. And he said he really liked it. And, I said, oh, where do you live? He said, I live under the bridge. And I said, which house? And yeah, I painted it. So I shared it with him and he really liked that. So yeah, a lot of fun things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would think that you get to meet, some of these people for sure. Okay. Is that it? Or do we have any
Yeah,
more? I think
got
that's
10.
it, right? Okay. We're back. This was a great opportunity for people to see what you do, and I'm really impressed with your work. I can tell you that I'm looking forward to this is going to be your first experience teaching for the Yellow Barn, but everybody here listening to the way Nathaniel talked about his work and his experiences and that you get an idea that he really has a lot to offer. All right, he's a very strong, talented guy, strong painter. And I think you'll have an opportunity to really learn how to compose, draw, learn perspective, things like that that will improve your work. Is there anything you want to say to the group before we end here tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think just a couple of final points. I think that a lot of people will look at the kind of painting that I'm doing and say that it's really hard, it's really complicated. It's really not. It just takes an understanding of how to manipulate the materials to get them to say what you want them to say. That's something I'm going to talk about. And the other thing I'm going to say is, I don't know if I've mentioned this to you, Walt, the only art classes I've taken as an adult, at least, has been with you. I mean, this is stuff that I learned, obviously, in large part through artists who describe their process, which has been invaluable, but it's not something that you need some sort of formal training to do. I think really anyone can do it if they want to. Obviously not everyone wants to. It just takes practice and understanding, and it's not as hard as it looks.
Yeah, and you're going to be able to share that with everyone. I think so if for anybody here tonight, if you think that you're interested, Nathaniel is teaching a class this spring, and I think that you can sign up for that class by going to the yellowbarnstudio.com website and look for his class, which is entitled again. What do you say it was?
It's realist drawing and painting.
Yeah. Okay. So that's in the catalog. All right.
Yes.
Well, with that, I'm going to say thank you all for joining us. and hope to see you again. And hopefully you'll be able to take Nathaniel's class.